What's up, everybody? There's a lot of people in the bass community that seem to think that the only reasons we would ever choose to go handheld slider down are either for very low free falls or when you're first learning and you're trying to progress towards going stowed. And while both of those are legitimate reasons to go handheld, there are several more that people just don't seem to talk about. In this video, I'm going to talk about 5 specific things which I believe make handheld far more superior than stowed when jumping slider down. And my hope is that after watching it, you'll start to look at handheld jumps a little bit differently, and you may even start to choose it as your main deployment method when jumping slider down. Let's get into it. Number 1, if you have a bad exit, you can just throw the pilot chute. In slider down, we don't have any air to work with. Even if you take it to the basement, we're not going to be able to fix any of the problems that may have been caused following a bad exit. If we slip, trip, or go off axis as we leave, the best strategy is to abort the free fall and get the canopy out as fast as possible. That's going to be much easier to accomplish when the pilot chute is already in your hand. Number 2, there's less movement required. When you're in free fall on a handheld jump, the only thing that has to move is your arm. We could narrow this down even further and say that the only thing that has to move is your elbow. Less movement in free fall gives us less opportunity to cause any kind of asymmetry during our deployment. Ultimately, less movement equals less opportunity for things to get messy. Number 3, we completely eliminate the chances of having a mispull. Mispulls are very uncommon slider down, but they do happen on occasion. When the pilot chute is in your hand, it's simply not an issue. Number 4, there's less chance of having a pilot chute hesitation. On a handheld jump, everything is staged in your hand. ZP, mesh, bridle. As soon as you throw, everything is already exposed to the air and things can start happening right away. On a stowed jump, your bridle is wrapped inside the mesh, which is then wrapped inside the ZP, and all of that is then packed inside your BOC. Because the ZP, mesh, and bridle are all wrapped on top of each other, it's going to take a little bit longer for those things to separate and for the extraction sequence to begin. Also, because of the configuration of it, every now and again you might throw it a little weird, or there might be something funky going on with the winds. It's going to take even longer for all of that stuff to separate and start the process, and you're going to get a hesitation. That is simply not an issue when we're going handheld. Number 5, we drastically reduce the chances of having any kind of bridle and pilot chute entanglement. I went into this in a lot of detail in my stowed video as part of the bridle awareness series. I'll leave the link to that video in the description. But basically what can happen is if you throw the pilot chute at a weird angle, hold on to it too long, or you flick your wrist as you're releasing, the pilot chute and the bridle can start to spin and interact with themselves. This happens so often and people have no idea that it's even happening. But by going handheld, we completely reduce the chances of that, if not completely eliminate it. Once we take all those elements and we combine them together, we get something very important, and that is more control over our deployments. More control means that we can take deeper delays with more confidence. Jacob Gardner, owner of Magic Backpacks, is famous for taking some of the deepest slider down delays that you'll ever see. Pretty frequently after he posts a video, someone will comment saying, "Oh, if you're going to take delays like that, why don't you just go stowed?" My hope is that this video will answer that question. Okay, let's talk about some of the negatives to going handheld slider down. Number 1 that you'll hear a lot is it's super awkward to run while you're holding onto something. And another one that's super common is that it's a lot more difficult to climb around awkward exit points when you're holding onto something. And while both of those are legitimate inconveniences, I would classify them as being skill issues, not safety disadvantages. I kind of put them in the same realm as packing your rig, setting up a PCA, setting up a static line, setting up a handheld. All of those things are things that you can get better at with never having to actually do a base jump. You can do them at home, in your garage, in a controlled environment with no stress. So don't be lazy. Put your rig on, set up a handheld, practice running around, practice climbing over stuff. I promise you that the more often that you do it, the easier it will get. Another negative that you'll hear is that there is a potential that the slack in the bridle could come up and snag your GoPro mount. Solution to that one is very simple. If you're going handheld, especially in a tailwind, just don't wear a camera on your head. One last thing is the wrap potential. So one thing I always like to say is that anytime that your bridle and pilot chute are exposed prior to the jump, you increase the chances of you wrapping yourself in it. On a handheld jump, the bridle is literally touching your arm at the start of the jump, which is the very thing that we don't want to get ourselves entangled with. There's a couple of things that we can do in our setup process that I think will drastically decrease the potential for having a wrap. The first is that when you have everything set up, you want to ensure that there's just enough slack in the bridle so I can flex and extend my arm and not pull the tuck out from my shoulder. The second thing that I think is a great idea is to set the pilot chute in the position that you want it to be in free fall after you leave, and when you exit, you just bring the other hand to meet it. Nice. I also think this is a really good practice to incorporate on running exits. When you're going to start your run, come back, have your hands set in the position, and then run from there. That's going to minimize the bridle from bouncing around and drastically decrease any potential of wrapping yourself in it. What's up, guys? When I first uploaded this video, I got a lot of comments and questions about this next section. I understand that it's different. A lot of you have probably not seen it before, and that's going to create a lot of curiosity, but I don't want it to be the thing that everybody zooms in on and gives the most attention in this video, because I've talked about a lot of really important things at the beginning. Personally, I don't configure my gear in this way very often because I like to do lots of different kinds of jumps. When I pack my rig, I don't always necessarily know what I'm going to do on the next jump. So when I'm going to go handheld, I'm usually just packed in the traditional way and I'll use the traditional setup. I do have a lot of friends who almost exclusively jump handheld, and they've been configuring their gear in this way for years and they absolutely swear by it. That's why I thought it would be interesting to include in this video. For those of you that have seen any of my previous videos, you may have noticed that I never directly talk about pin tension, pin orientation, whether you should prime your pins or not, whether you should jump with your flap open or not. And the reason I never mentioned those things is that there's a lot of nuance to them. Depending on the type of jump that you're doing, what's the size of your pilot chute, what's the size and weight of your canopy. It's just an endless can of worms that I'm not ready to open, and more than anything, I don't want the focal points of my videos to turn into arguments about that. With all of those things, you're going to get people on both sides that have tons of success doing it completely different ways, and they'll preach that their way is the way. There is a super good website, Watch Thy Bridle, which has been referenced all over the internet for a very long time. While some of the information on that website is a little outdated, I think it's a great resource and everybody should check it out. I do hope to address all those topics in future videos, but for now, let's just get back to this one. There is one thing that we can do that drastically reduces how much slack we have in the bridle, and that's inverting our pin routing. If we have a look at a traditional handheld setup, bridle comes out of the middle, goes from the top pin to the bottom pin, then the excess slack goes up to the shoulder to give yourself a tuck, and then out to your hand. With the inverted routing, we do that backwards. Bridle comes out the middle, we go bottom pin first, then the top pin, up to your shoulder and out to your hand. When routed this way, the tuck on your shoulder is not 100% necessary. Traditionally, the reason that we have a tuck is to first keep the bridle away from the bottom corner so it doesn't become a snag hazard, and second, to decrease how much slack there is in the bridle at the top. When configured this way, I still think giving yourself a tuck is a good idea because we decrease how much tension there is between the top pin and your hand so you don't accidentally pop it when moving around the exit. If you are thinking about playing around with the inverted pin routing, make sure that you have someone that has more experience to watch over you. This video is not to act as a replacement for quality instruction or mentorship. Always try and get a gear check from somebody you trust as close to exiting as possible to make sure that your setup is clean and everything is routed correctly. And back to my golden rule when we're doing PCAs, static lines and handhelds is never gear up with your pilot chute outside of your rig. Coming full circle with all of this, my goal is not to get people to stop going stowed slider down. It absolutely has its place. Maybe you're working on aerials, maybe you want to dial in your mechanics before a slider up trip, or maybe you just love the way it feels. And while that's not a good reason to take more risk on a jump, the feeling of freedom of just running off the edge of something and blasting into the air with nothing in your hands and just feeling completely free while you're in free fall, that is one of the main reasons that attracts a lot of us to base jumping in the beginning. I mostly just want people to understand that most of the time there's far more advantages to going handheld when you're slider down versus going stowed. All right, everybody, thank you for watching. If you've made it this far, my hope is that you're going to join the campaign in making handheld great again. If you want to get one of these sweet hats, you can grab one at basegear.net. All proceeds go directly to me, and that will encourage me to make more videos like this for you. I'll see you next time.